people, here we go. Let's do this. Kick back, relax, give us a call.
Breakfast is ready.
Kaylee, take my car. Turn back.
No, don't do that.
What do you want with me?
Damn that girl. Vous allez participer à ce rendez-vous.
Let's go, wrap it up. Let's go.
Okay, hello. How are you, Ev?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you for taking the time to discuss your documentary and your work, and for being part of the 10th anniversary of the Paris Art and Movie Awards Film Festival. Where are you now? Are you in California?
I am in California. I'm currently living in North Hollywood, California.
Okay, what's about the Boston sign, Boston, Massachusetts? I see on the back, in the background.
Yeah, prior to living here in North Hollywood, I lived in Boston for a couple of years and worked out there, so I represent that area as well.
Okay, cool. So we're here today to talk about the documentary, All Its Name Implies. You are listed for official competition, Best Documentary at this year's festival, and we want to know more about it. But first, what about you? I know you have a lot of credits, you have a lot of experience, you worked on a lot of documentaries and TV stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about you so the audience can get to know you a little bit better?
Absolutely, yeah. My passion has always been film and television and storytelling for about as long as I can remember. My professional career really began in earnest, I would say, in the 2012 time range. Prior to that, I was doing a lot of independent films and music videos and whatever I could get my hands on. And in 2012, I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I began working for professional sports teams in that region. Most notably, I think the San Francisco Giants, where I worked full time, and worked for the Golden State Warriors, and became a part of their in-house production companies. So
nice.
Grew from there. I was really fortunate enough to be a part of the San Francisco Giants World Series championship in 2014, which was a really amazing experience to be able to cover that. Being the dugout as the team won the championship. And I then moved to Boston, as we talked about, to work for a company called Spartan Race, and traveled the country and the world a little bit as their lead cinematographer, and just so a lot of sports
Sports, yeah.
And now it's sort of transitioned into an attempt at full-time filmmaking.
Okay. What about the Emmy Award winning stuff? So you won Emmy Awards for short documentaries as a producer, cinematographer, and editor. So that means you're good at what you do first, and you get some recognition, big recognition. That's at the Emmy Awards. But also, you know what it takes to build together a documentary. We're talking image, editing, production. So I guess that helps when you have to tell a story, whether it's on a film or a documentary.
Yeah, 100%. My goal as a professional creative, as a professional filmmaker, has always been to become the most well-rounded, have the most well-rounded talents that I can. And I think that's important, one, because I can try to excel in different areas, but two, because even if I begin to focus on one particular area on a particular project, I have a frame of reference for the other people that are working on that project, because I've been an editor, so I know what an editor is going through, and I've been a shooter, I know what a shooter's going through. My Emmy Award winning stuff was primarily in conjunction with my work with the San Francisco Giants.
Yes, Giants.
Which was, like I mentioned, very exciting. And I won an Emmy Award for one short documentary we created for Spartan Race. So it was very rewarding for me during that time, because I worked in San Francisco and created so much stuff there, and then moved to Boston, and to be recognized for my work in Boston as well was a really very validating experience.
How does it feel when you get the news that you get nominated for the Emmy, and then you get the news that you go home with a win? How do you feel at that moment?
The nomination is really it feels great. I mean, I know that's underselling it a little bit, but it's very rewarding to just know that your work is considered on a high enough level that it's even nominated. And then I've been fortunate enough to be nominated quite a few times, so I know losing a lot better than I know winning. But so the winning is obviously wonderful, and we celebrate very well on those nights. But it's important always to keep everything in perspective, because the losing comes just as often, if not more so. So
it's the nomination is already a win, because when you reach that level, that puts you on the map, I guess. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The documentary, we're gonna screen the trailer in a few moments. That's your directorial debut, am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
How did you handle this new responsibility? And I guess you were hands-on on all aspects of the process, because you've been editing and producing and shooting yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about how you apprehended being a director for the first time?
Absolutely. Well, sort of what we were speaking about before, about trying to be as well-rounded as possible. I feel like the work I've done in the past, particularly for my jobs with the Giants and Spartan, had really helped me prepare for this moment. So it felt like a more natural transition than perhaps it would have under other circumstances, because at those jobs, so much of what I was doing was crafting a story, no matter how long the final result was going to be. Whether it was literally 1 minute long for Instagram, how do you tell a full story in that minute?
Yeah.
And graduating to a 5-minute piece, and graduating to 15, and on and on and on. And so to me, it was just sort of a natural progression to say, okay, I know we wanted to make this film. My co-producer and girlfriend, Monique Birtwell, and I decided to make this film. And once that we started going down that road, it was just a matter of, okay, I know all these things. I know how to set up interviews and how to conduct interviews, and how to operate a camera while doing the interview. Less than ideal, but made it work. And I have a good network of folks whose opinions I trust greatly, that once I begin the editing process, I could sort of
get a fresh eye on it.
Get their opinions, exactly. And so it was just, it's what I'd been doing on a larger scale, so it worked out well in that regard. Okay,
we are gonna watch the trailer of the documentary and continue this discussion right after. Okay.
Okay.
It was pretty much exactly what I had hoped it would be, just the friendliest place on earth.
Town of 27,000 people, seeking out the quiet, kind of slower paced life.
One of the things that happens is if you're talking to somebody on the phone and you give them your address, they say, "Is it really paradise?" And I think it really was.
Can you describe your morning for me on November 8th? What happened?
Sure. Let me take a deep breath first.
The morning of the fire?
Yes.
It started out as a normal day.
And I look outside and there's a column of smoke.
And I could see in a distance that there was a police car, and I thought, I'm gonna go check with him to see how much time we have. He said, "You have no time. You have to get out."
You never want to, as a parent, look at your kids
and go, I don't know how to save you right now. All I could think of as the fire was getting closer and was getting hotter and the car started overheating. And I kept thinking, like, I'm gonna watch my kids choke and burn to death in front of me, and I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do.
It was just wall-to-wall traffic coming from both directions. I sat there for, had to be 45 minutes while the world was burning down around us. And I had to think to myself, am I really gonna sit here and watch my girls burn to death? And that kind of got me moving. And I wasn't gonna sit there and I wasn't gonna let that happen.
It started to get really dark, and then you started to hear some booms in the distance. Boom, boom, boom.
When we saw the fire and how quickly it was moving, it was literally do or die.
We can always replace this material stuff, but you can't replace you. Amen.
Some of the neighborhoods, there's not one house left.
People say paradise was wiped off the map. No, it was not wiped off the map. I'm still here.
I want to see my family remain in paradise, and I want to watch paradise rebuild.
There's a lot that don't want to leave that hill, and they're going to do whatever they have to be able to rebuild and live there again.
You guys are on film, you bunch of mountain boys.
Whether we like it or not, this has changed our community forever.
That kind of sets the tone to it. It's, I gotta say, the documentary is, I'm gonna say it, it's not sad. On the contrary, on the opposite, it's about people, it's about resilience, rise again, and the way you put it all together, it's not a tragic story. It's a story about how people get back up. And that's what's beautiful about this documentary. What was your approach on it? How did it start? Did you start with certain people? Did you start filming the fire? What was the first thing you had in the box, in the camera?
The very first thing, the starting this process was I just knew I wanted to get into the town while it was in the days following as the fire started on November 8th of 2018.
Yeah.
And we started to realize for lack of a better term, what a big deal this was. The destruction.
Yeah.
And we start to get pieces of information that so much of the town is gone. And as we realized that was getting bigger and bigger, and it was becoming such a newsworthy event that all these different camera crews and media folks would be coming into Paradise, I thought I really wanted to get in there and at least be one of those people, to be someone that has a frame of reference for the town, has love for the town, knows about the town. I just thought it was important that I get in there and chronicle that. So I was first able, it took some effort to get into the town, but I was first able to get in, I believe it was November 24th, 2018, which was about a week or so before the town reopened to the public. And those were the first shots that I collected, was driving around, this destroyed area,
yeah,
and trying to get some images.
So you wanted to be a voice from the inside. You are from Paradise. You've been raised in Paradise. So yeah, you wanted to talk about it in a different way than the news, because the news, it's a lot of flash and then it's gone. And you wanted to bring something different that was gonna take the time to talk to the people and to bring their experience and their testimony to film. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. Watching, it's very surreal to watch your hometown, this really small place that most people have never heard of, on CNN and on NBC and all these major networks, and thinking that's our town.
That's us.
and not loving the way sometimes, I won't speak too generally, but sometimes not loving the way it was being portrayed, and just it was spoken of with such generalities and vaguities. And I thought we have to get someone in there that can cover this from an inside perspective.
Did you feel you had to? Did you feel like a mission of yours to document that?
I did to an extent. You want to think that you can do some good. I was trying to think of a way that I could tangibly do some good. I can't. I'm not good at building things. I'm not good at that sort of thing. I couldn't be up there doing hands-on work, and I just thought, how can I use my skill set to try to benefit the town, and that's where it went.
It's a family matter. It's two words that come a lot in the documentary is community, people helping each other and sharing the same challenges, and family. Because in the film, because your family really is from Paradise, California. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of your cousins and several people of your family that end up in the documentary giving personal testimony, but also these guys and these people from your family play a role in town and have something to say. So was it strange to interview family members?
It was, to an extent. I have a couple cousins in there, and then my mother is one of the main characters, and I also interview an uncle. And it was my mother, Susan, was the very first person I interviewed for the documentary, and it was right as I was kind of coming to grips with the fact that, okay, we're really going to go down this road and try to make a feature film. And I said, okay. It was at Christmas time. We were celebrating Christmas as best we could, 6 weeks after the fire. And I said, Mom, would you sit down? I want to do an interview with you and hear about your experience and what you're going through right now. And it was so incredibly emotional. And I felt like I learned so much more about my mom's experience from just doing an interview. Wow. And she was so, and I people say I have to say this because it's my mom, but she was so well spoken and gracious in her replies that I thought, okay, we can really do this. We can really make this movie. And beyond that, as I started to put feelers out there to put the word out, we'd be making this film. It reminded me of so much of what Paradise is about, which is that community and that family aspect, because folks would email me and say, hey, you really need to talk to the director of the World Nugget Museum. And I would say, oh, okay, I'd love to talk to him. And then they'd give me his name. They'd say, oh, his name's Mark Thorpe. And I said, that's my cousin. And it's such a small town that every turn there was someone else. It was like, oh, of course.
That's sweet. So the response in Paradise was just great. How was the response outside when you started to go? This is a French premiere at the Paris Art and Movie Awards, but the documentary already premiered in the US. So how was the response from the general audience, let's say?
That's been really interesting for me to watch, because the film, one of my main goals was to make something really for Paradise, and that people of Paradise could watch and say, that's our town, and feel proud of. And so as I showed it in Paradise and the surrounding areas, the reaction was really overwhelmingly great. And that obviously was very special for me. And as it's now shown a couple of times outside of that area, where it's being viewed by audiences who might not have a direct connection to Paradise, and obviously might not know the people that are in the film, it's been interesting. The reaction has been very good, and people, I think, have been really drawn to different characters within the film, and it's fascinating to see. One person, I showed it to a small group of some coworkers down here in Los Angeles in a private showing, and one young woman approached me and said, I don't have a husband and I don't have children. These are things I don't have yet, but watching that film made me want to get a husband and have children and move to a place like Paradise so I can be a part of that.
Wow, that's beautiful, because that means through the documentary and the drama comes something that is life, and wanting to have a life and a family and be part of that. So you really made it, you turn it around to make something positive out of it. That's great.
Yeah, it was. I thought that was some of the highest praise I could possibly get. And as Paradise is, lost so much of their population as people lost their homes, obviously, and were forced to scatter a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt very good that something that I have helped create might inspire folks to within their day-to-day lives, but also just to literally move to Paradise and show it for the beautiful place that it is.
We had I am in Yucca Valley right now. It's right next to the Joshua Tree National Park, about 2 hours from Los Angeles. And we had a fire about a month ago, end of July. And I know people in the Morongo Basin that had to evacuate. And every day we were looking at the maps to see the progression of the fire. And here in my house, we were ready to evacuate if we needed to. The bags were ready with the medications and the valuables, and the car was ready. It's a very, very frightening sentiment, because there is nothing you can do but wait. Where were you when the fire started to attack, to burn Paradise? Were you in Paradise or were you somewhere else?
I was not. I was in Glendale in my apartment at that time with my girlfriend Monique, and we woke up that morning, and I believe Monique was speaking to her mother, who still lived in Paradise at that time, and I was seeing on social media that people were starting to post these very the
videos of the flames. And
well, early on it was just, here's a sky and it's pretty smoky. And then 15 minutes later, here's solid black sky that you can't see anything. It was like, oh, this one feels a little different. A lot of people were posting. Growing up in Paradise and that surrounding area, we're no strangers to the threat of fire. And there's been a lot of, we cover that a little bit in the film. There's been a lot of fires that have gotten close over the years. And so I think there's a certain sense of, okay, here's another fire. We're going to have to cancel the schools and be careful outside and all that. And on that morning, it was clear early on that it was very different. And
what's kind of crazy is how quickly people had to evacuate. There is one woman in a documentary saying that she is told to evacuate, and she says, when? And they answer, now. You have no more time. It's now. And this is there is the evacuation warning, 1, 2, 3 levels and everything, but for Paradise, it looks like it was all of a sudden that you had no time. You had to leave if you want to survive. So that there was no time gap between the moment, okay, we have to be ready, we may evacuate, that's another fire, and the moment that, oh, that's already too late, we have to leave our house. That must have been hard for you to collect all the interviews, because people are still pretty shaken up by that.
Yes, absolutely. You're correct in your assessment about it moving so quickly, and that being what created, I think, so much of the chaos and the problems that morning. Quickly, Paradise had a pretty elaborate evacuation plan where within the town there were designated zones. And so if the town was going to send out evacuation warnings, they could say, okay, this zone is evacuating and this zone is evacuating. But what happened that morning was, because the fire was moving so quickly and because it was blowing kind of over the entire town at once, all of the zones basically had to evacuate at the exact same time. And that was not a contingency plan that I think the town was built for, like physically built for. The evacuation routes clogged up quickly.
It shows in the documentary that one long line of cars trying to evacuate, and that man who's saying it just takes one guy, and he takes the left line to pass everyone, basically. And what's crazy, he explains in the documentary, he felt impolite to pass everyone to survive, because he was at the end of the line and the fire was starting to eat up the car. And his reaction is to say, I felt impolite passing my friends and relatives on the line, and then of course everybody follows. So even in the darkest moment, people of paradise care for each other, and that's a takeaway that's just very relevant right now, I guess.
Yeah, that was something that really struck me as I began conducting interviews and talking to people. That gentleman is a very good friend of mine named Richie, and just hearing his story and the story of his family and other people I spoke to. There's a young man in the film named Jason who helped his two young daughters escape and literally got out of their car, and he ran and carried them through the fire, basically. And I just thought there were so many everyday people who were so heroic on that day that people really
reacted with common sense, good common sense, not panicking.
Yes.
Saving the kids, saving the family, and not panicking. That's, I guess it takes a lot of guts. I don't know. It's impressive in the documentary. That sense of humanity is very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it was overwhelming in a positive way to know almost all of what I heard about people's interactions on that morning, which we can't imagine how stressful and scary that would be, was very positive, that people were looking out for one another. And that is obviously something that I think can inspire a lot of people.
When you saw that was becoming maybe the big one, the fire, and that your family was evacuating, I guess, what's your reaction? You are in Glendale, you know they are in peril. What do you do? What's your reaction?
It was, it was very difficult. I was very fortunate in the sense that I had gotten word from my mom that she had gotten out pretty early.
Okay.
And fairly easily comparatively to a lot of other people. And so that was a huge relief of mine, obviously. But then immediately my mind, it's Paradise, it's a small town, you know everyone. And so immediately my brain goes to all of my close friends and other relatives who still live in the town. And so it becomes this kind of mad dash to try to reach out to people and get a text message. Are you okay? Are you getting out? And it all kind of culminated when I got through. I was able to speak to my uncle Charlie, and he had just, I interview him in the film, Chuck Duran, and he had just driven through a tunnel of fire, a literal tunnel of fire where his car was melting, and he was very certain that he was going to die. Right after that, I spoke to him on the phone, and he was, just deliriously shocked, sad. He was crying, he was yelling, and he was just yelling. I knew I was going to die. I knew I was going to die. And he was yelling, everyone behind me, has to, And so at that moment, I knew how, that was really when I knew how heavy this was, how serious this was. And Monique and I think right after that call, I said, we're going to Paradise. So we drove up. We drove up to Chico, which is a neighboring city, to just be with family and just, hug each other and be there.
His testimony, your uncle, is, I don't know, the way he describes what he felt when he was in the car. And there's a couple of the people in the documentary explaining what they think, like, okay, I'm going to die in my car, and I hope the smoke gets me before I burn alive. Am I going to see my kids dying in the fire? And what's awful is kind of just like I don't want to make stupid comparison, but a tornado. You have the time to think about what's happening to you, and that makes it just horrible. And the movie talks about it. The movie talks about PTSD and all the traumatic reactions that people still have to live with today. How do you, I guess you know how people deal with that, because you have friends and relatives that are in that position. How are people feeling today? Is it over? How did they deal with that?
Well, I think that's a difficult question to answer in some ways, because I don't want to speak too much for other people's experiences. What I can tell you from the people that I know personally is that it's a mixed bag. right? I mean, some people, I think, because it's also dependent upon their specific experience that day. Is I think some people who were able to get out maybe a little easier, sure, you can kind of start to process that and perhaps move on a little. And I think there are a lot of people who went through such horrible things that day that that's not going to go away anytime soon. And I think so much of it, I mean, it's been almost 2 years now, but I still think it's hard to know how these things might affect people over a long period of time. And not to mention, just because of the current state of California and the things that are happening right now. I know I've seen a lot of people, and I've talked to several.
Bringing everything back, I guess.
Exactly. They wake up and they see it, and they have their children saying, is this going to be like November 8th again? Are we going to be in trouble? You know, and that's heartbreaking. And I can't imagine that makes it easier for people to, you know, quote unquote, move on, because it's right there.
I mean, when I watched the documentary, one question came to me as an audience. It was like, people came back to paradise after that, and they still want to live in paradise, despite the risk and despite the traumatic experience. I guess it's one of the reasons why you titled All Its Name Implies the resilience of the people of paradise. There is something out of the ordinary in coming back to that place, but this is where they live, so they have to, I guess.
Well, I do feel like a lot of them do feel like they, you know, quote unquote, have to, because of that sense of community and what paradise represents for so many people who love it. And I think that there's risk. And I think from an outside perspective, there's a lot of people that could understandably say, how could you ever move back there after that happened? Why would you want to do that? And I think the young man, Jason, who's in the film, who I referenced before, has a soundbite where he said something about there's risks anywhere you live. If you live, you know, down in the South, or you might have to deal with hurricanes and flooding, or you know, up north, there'd be severe winters and earthquakes somewhere else. And this is just ours. It's fire. And we have to learn how to deal with it and adapt. And I think there's also a certain stubbornness to
the community
in paradise that say, you're not getting us off. You're not getting us off this hill.
This is my place. I live here. I'm going to be back.
This is our home. Yes.
This is our home. The documentary does not use any clip from news medias. It does not use any outside documentation. It only uses what you filmed or your team and what people gave you from their phone when they were trapped inside. That makes this documentary different, because it plays in a different category. It makes it human. It's not about, this is a documentary about the fire, this is going to be spectacular, and you're going to see how people survived. This is more a documentary about, hey, this happened to us, and this is a documentary about us. Makes it human. How did you build up that? Did you have a script, and how did you connect all the interviews together? What was your red line, the common piece of everything?
Well, that was it was an interesting process from a filmmaking perspective, because everything was so reactionary, which I don't think is normally the goal of anyone trying to make a film. Is you want to have a plan and you want to have a script and an outline. And with so much of this, because it was happening in real time, I just said, I just have to shoot. And I'm just going to film everything I can and start trying to put it together later. And as I began to put it together, that was probably the most challenging thing from an editing perspective, or the overall filmmaking perspective, was having to select out certain stories to highlight and to really focus on, and how much time to spend with each person. Because I interviewed just over 40 people, and I'm not exaggerating when I say each of those people could have been a feature-length film on their own. Their story everyone's story, even the people who weren't in the town that day, have some stories about trying to get back and reach. So it was really that was a challenge, but it began to. I knew there were certain things I wanted to include, and I would just kind of build out from there. Where I'd say, okay, I have to have this person talking about this thing, and then just start to fill in around.
You get family in Paradise, you get friends, you get everyone. When you screen the documentary in Paradise for the first time, I guess maybe people cried, people reacted. Must have been more than just an audience watching a documentary. It was a community, I guess, coming together to maybe mourn, maybe share something, maybe reconnect. Can you describe a little bit that human side of the documentary?
Absolutely. The first screening where anybody besides me and a very small group of people saw the film was in Chico, which was right next to Paradise. And then just a couple of weeks later, we showed it in Paradise. And at both of those screenings, they were full houses. And there was, at the first one in particular, there was actually a real, almost like jovial reunion feel to it, where people were getting together and neighbors seeing each other for the first time in a long time. And I think, everyone again has their unique experience, but I think for a lot of people who lived through it, seeing this film has been a very cathartic experience. And so I've had a number of people, including some strangers, reach out to me and say that they felt sort of a release, like a pressure release. And there was one young woman in particular who I didn't know prior who reached out and said that the film enabled her and her husband to have some really difficult conversations that they hadn't had yet about the fire and about their emotions and about PTSD, because they saw that piece and were ready to talk about how they were being affected by it. And so just those sort of things that maybe, as the filmmaker, you don't think about ahead of time. You just think, I'm trying to make a good film as best I can. And then so for people to have reactions like that has just been more rewarding than I can even put into words.
It's that's what's beautiful about the documentary. It's the way it talks about the people and how they react. Still, you have a few people that explain in the documentary how the fire worked, how it was fueled by, because it was not the first time Paradise was surrounded by a fire. So there was another one previously. So every tree and every vegetation was kind of new, and that's a bit of fuel for fire. So kind of the conditions were aligned to make that fire a devastating one. Did you approach certain interviews in a different ways to get some technical insight for the documentary?
That's exactly right. When I spoke to a retired fire chief of Paradise named Jim Broshears, who's a man I've had the privilege of knowing for a long time, I knew, okay, Jim is going to be the guy who can give me the explanations, right? I obviously want to hear about his experiences on that day and his love of Paradise, just like I asked everybody else about. But I thought I have to really focus my questions to get a description of what happened. And similarly, when I was fortunate enough to interview Sheriff Honey up there, I said I need to focus my questions more on his, step-by-step process of what he went through on that day and what happened immediately afterwards. And that was a very interesting experience for me, because I was sort of figuring that stuff out on the fly, where it's like, okay, I got Sheriff Honey agreed to do this interview, which I was so grateful for, but now I have to come up with some new questions because I'm going to be asking him very different things than I would people who just had driven through it.
That's very interesting. You say how it was reactionary and how you had to find some solutions and some ideas on the fly, because the topic was imposed on you, so you built around it. Some people, a lot of people had the house burned down, and some didn't. And the documentary is very interesting also in that way, is that 2 or 3 couples in the documentary explain that, in a way, okay, they sometimes wish their house had burned like everybody else because it didn't. So now they are dealing with insurance and the guilt mechanism of not being a victim like the other. Why was I spared? And all that kind of stuff. You never hear about that on the news. So can you tell us a little bit about it? Because you met these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I going into the project, I don't think that had crossed my mind either, because you're right. It's not something you hear a lot about. And I think the initial understandable reaction is to think, oh my gosh, these people lost all their homes and they lost this. And that's the story that so many people are drawn to. And I was very fortunate enough that both those couples reached out to me. The Spikers and the Ranks are the folks that I spoke to about that in the film, and said, hey, you know, our home survived, and we're you know, comfortable telling our story if you'd like. And that was sort of towards the end of the production, so I wasn't even sure if I needed more interviews. And I went and I spoke with both of them, obviously, and I was so happy I did, because it is such a unique, different set of issues that those folks have to deal with. But I think, if I might say, no less devastating in a lot of ways, because as you mentioned, there are such different insurance challenges for so many of those folks. You know, just because your house survived, your things survived, which is wonderful, obviously, but now where is your house? I mean, for a year afterwards, you don't have any neighbors. This is not the place you chose to live.
Yeah.
For so many of them, they didn't have water, they didn't have electricity for a long time. So I think that was a really interesting dynamic, and I'm really appreciative of those people for being so honest. I think them saying that sometimes they wish their homes had just burned down and that would make it easier is incredibly brave and honest to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sense of homelessness. Is it your mother that in the documentary that we see living in a hotel room?
Mm-hmm.
And she knows that she's lucky to she has survived. She knows she's in a very small place, that hotel room, and the way she describes and she gives us a tour of the hotel room is funny and human and very relatable. This is, I don't know, I feel like people in paradise have a sense of humanity that's very special. Do you sometimes want to go back and live there? Maybe when you're going to retire, where do you stand on that?
I do. I 100% do. It's a conversation that my girlfriend and I have had and continue to have. Because particularly in the immediate aftermath of the fire, that sense of community and the sense of resolve that so many people, you know, especially that I was speaking to, but there were so many gatherings of different generations of people in paradise coming together to talk about what they love about the town. And as it begins to transition from the immediate sense of grief and loss to let's get a little optimistic and how can we rebuild paradise into a town that has everything we loved about it and even try to make aspects of it better. That energy is very contagious. And I felt very strongly talking to several people, a lot of people over that course of time, that, you know, it feels like it's the kind of thing you want to be a part of. It really feels pride.
You do. Are you going to place the documentary on Amazon, on, I don't know, Hulu, Netflix? What are you going to do with it now? Now you have that finished product. Are you going to spread it around after the festival run?
That to me, I often joke because I say, I made this entire film from a production standpoint very largely on my own. And all of this stuff after that is by far the hardest part of making a film, is trying to get it out there and trying to know the best way to do that. So it's an ongoing learning process. I've been fortunate enough to have the film accepted into several festivals, including yours, obviously, which we're so grateful for. And we just hope that through that, the audience can continue to grow and and awareness of Paradise, and obviously the entire state of California and the entire West Coast, basically what they're going through, will continue to go up. But it's such a hard decision-making process to put it on Amazon, where, you know, Amazon will take 50% of all the money raised. And so much, any money I raise with this film, I try to donate a vast majority of that back to Paradise. I've had it on Vimeo on demand for different durations to try to raise a little money here and there. And it's a challenge, but hopefully it continues to get a little more
exposure,
more exposure, and we can see what happens. I would love to have it on a streaming service for everyone to see.
What's your next project? What are you working on right now?
I have a couple of irons in the fire. That's not a great metaphor for the moment, as soon as I said it. I'm working on the pre-production of another documentary film, which is another rather personal story, where I can't really get into a ton of the details on that right now because I'm still sorting out some of the things, but it has to do with exploring youth suicide and that epidemic. So I'm working on potentially getting that underway, and then I'm working on a short documentary film, co-producing with my girlfriend Monique, the co-producer of this film, about a drag queen lip sync contest that's held here in Los Angeles, and the adaptations that they're having to go through, from going from a live show to a virtual show, hopefully back to a live show here in the future. So we're working on that. That one's a little bit more upbeat than some of the other projects I've been working on. So it's fun.
Got you. If people want to see the documentary, we're going to screen it on Thursday. It's the opening feature of the festival this year. It's going to be 8:30 p.m. Paris time, which makes, what time is it? It's about it's going to be right now in a few days. So even from American people who want to tune in and catch the documentary, it's accessible. It's at night in France, but it's going to be around 11:30 here in Los Angeles, California. There is no geo-blocking on the festival. We are an international film festival, so that means the documentary is going to be available when it screens anywhere in the world. What can I say? Get your tickets if you're interested in. You get a banner on the bottom. It's only €2 for the whole festival, which means you're going to be able to see the documentary, all its name implies. You're going to be able to access all the interviews, the masterclass, and the more than 100 films we screen this year at the festival. Is there anything you want to add, Ev? Anything else you want to say about this documentary or the work you submitted to us?
Well, I'll just say again, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for including our film in your festival. I encourage everyone to please check it out, and if you enjoy it, please tell other people about it. That's the strength of word of mouth is really our powerful driver. And obviously, I can't say enough about sending love and well wishes to everyone in California and the surrounding areas, Oregon and Washington and everywhere. Everyone's really going through it right now. I know the people of Paradise are again surrounded by smoke and terrible conditions, and there's a lot of places up there that are going through things very similarly to what Paradise went through. And I hope that if whoever checks out this film is able to draw some inspiration and hope from that. And we love you guys, and we're pulling for everybody here.
I think they will. The documentary really, I was a stranger to the topic before I watched the documentary, and I'm not anymore. And I'm a foreigner in the US. So I really think the documentary opens a window of humanity and connection to this kind of situation. And we do feel for everyone affected, and we want to support. So please watch the documentary and take anything away from it so you can maybe go through these difficult times. Thank you, Ev. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate your insight And if you have friends and people who want to get the live stream that we have right now, it's going to be on replay at the exact same time that the documentary. So check on cinecapsule.com and you're going to access the documentary and the whole replay of the Q&A we just did. Thank you, Ev.
Wonderful.
Be well and talk soon.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, people, here we go. Let's do this. Kick back, relax.